At Syntropy, I want heart-led, purpose-driven leaders who want to bring their values more fully online in their company. We offer coaching and consulting around these practices such that we increase the capacity for leaders and their conscious companies to be more self-sufficient. What I've done with the toolkit is to create the shortest distance to action that I can, to make people as self-sufficient as possible by getting them into action. Because adults learn best by doing, mostly in high context, high fidelity environments that are most closely aligned with the real thing, the work environment itself. What I'm hoping to be of service is to engage conscious leaders, give them the tools and practices and the framework they need to take their companies to the next level. At Syntropy, we've created a toolkit of practices that help catalyze the 4 principles of conscious capitalism: purpose, leadership, culture, and stakeholder orientation, which I often shorten to impact. The idea is to provide the tools for the necessary personal, interpersonal, and organizational change so that companies can actually be a force for good in the world. I think what we've done in the toolkit is summarize, synthesize, and simplified best practices so that people can get the benefit of these modularized, personalized practices that can be stitched together to deliver outsized returns in their business and get them closer to living their values more fully, both in their personal lives and in their professional lives as well. This generation will be the recipients of the largest wealth transfer in the history of this country. Between $30 and $40 trillion is anticipated to move from the baby boomer generation to the Gen X and millennial generations. I think we have an opportunity for a second 60s to come about, but this time the hippies have the money and the power. And the third megatrend that I think is worth looking at is that there is an expectation for companies to be more honest, more transparent, and more authentic. And given 24/7 access to information, I think there are fewer and fewer places for bad actors to hide. So for those 3 large reasons, 3 megatrends I see in our current reality and on the near-term horizon, I'm optimistic about the future of our world. Many conscious leaders come to me and say, in my personal life, I'm able to live my values out loud, as it were. But increasingly, generations of the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation are expecting the companies that they buy from, work for, and invest in to support their values around socially responsible and environmentally friendly products. I see people taking up various practices in their personal lives. Maybe it's a mindfulness practice, maybe it's a regular yoga practice. Maybe they're playing around with doing some culture work in their companies, or maybe even putting up a purpose statement. It's all disconnected for people. The synergy of multiple practices used together drives the syntropy. So the reality is the sum is greater than the total of its parts. And I think what happens is people don't have an organizing frame that Syntropy provides in terms of the conscious capitalism model to hold all of those things together. You might hire a consultant to come in and talk about culture. You have another consultant come in and talk about leadership. Somebody else is talking about sustainability or corporate social responsibility, and somebody else is talking about purpose. The synergy, where the total is greater than the sum of its parts, is what drives the syntropy, that ever-increasing upward push into increasing circles of care, compassion, and cooperation, or psychological wholeness. So the synergy drives the syntropy. And here at Syntropy, what we're trying to do is to enable that upward move to increase psychological wholeness among leaders and a greater contribution to a more just, humane, and sustainable human presence on this earth. As a purpose guide, I learned an entire toolkit of practices specific to purpose discovery, reducing resistance to embodying your purpose, and ways to formally embody and live your purpose into the world. And a lot of those tools and practices I include in my toolkit for a corporate audience. All of this is driven by a belief that we all have a deeper purpose stamped on our soul at birth, and that we're not here by accident. And for those people who are facing down their own dark night of the soul, asking themselves, what am I here to do in this world? I think I have a path to at least finding the answer. It's based on that fundamental premise that everyone has a deeper purpose, and that identifying with it and aligning with it, bringing it into the world, is our best and highest use for our short time on this planet. All change happens from the inside out, from the individual to the collective. And the inside out matter of change is driven primarily by consciousness. The first step is that we need to wake up to our radical interconnectedness to all of life. That's the heart opening experience associated with the enlightenment experience. The other dimension of growth is vertical development into increasing maturation. And as our self-sense, who we feel ourselves to be in the world, moves from a strict identification with ourselves, from an egocentric level to an ethnocentric level, me and mine, my tribe, my people, to a world-centric level, to a cosmocentric level of development. As our self-sense, who we feel ourselves to be in the world, enlarges, so do our values, and so does our circle of care and concern. This is syntropy in action, essentially, where the upward evolutionary movement to increasing circles of care and concern. The reason that people are still selfish is that, according to Ken Wilber in the Integral Theory, 70% of people are still at an ethnocentric level or lower. So they're like, I could give a crap about the rest of the world. I only care about me and mine. So the directionality of growth goes from me to us to all of us. And when I feel myself connected to all of us, generosity wells up in my own soul. When I feel a sense of abundance and fullness, the natural inclination is for me to serve, to give it away, to be of service to the world. I went out on a surfboard and I was sitting waiting for the next set to roll in. The barrier between what is me and what is the ocean and what is the rest of the living world faded away and left me feeling this incredible sense of overwhelming joy, open-hearted compassion, a recognition of the sacredness of the world. I realized that if I'm going to honor that vision that I was graced to see, that I needed to be able to integrate that into the work that I did in the world. The challenge was how to heal the wound between money and meaning and profit and purpose in people's life in order for business itself to be a force for good in the world. I went down to Peru on a research trip, the idea of replicable micro-businesses to create sustainable, scalable solutions to poverty in the developing world. We ended up launching a taxi business. We basically help provide a vehicle to move people out of the informal economy to the formal economy. And with this fleet, then I could knock on the doors of corporate clients where they could make more money, and then they can level up and actually move not only out of poverty, but at least on the lower rungs of the middle class. The idea was similar to a prepaid cell phone. People could pay for their power as they use it. We created a series of prepaid electricity meters and a back-end accounting system that would allow low-income people to pay for their power as they use it. And so they could charge up their system by sending a SMS text and recharge their system, and the lights go back on. We were acquired in 2017 by Mobisol, which is a German solar manufacturer. 2 social enterprises under my belt, had an exit, a few dollars in my pocket. What does it all mean? What was driving me? There's an epidemic in our country of anxiety, depression, and obesity. A lot of people are calling it a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous world. We still have huge gaps between rich and poor. We have terrorism, we have environmental degradation, species extinction, forced migration, and on and on. The way through this uncertain world that we live in comes from a reliance on this deeper purpose. By leaning on that, independent of what is happening out in the world, we can find our way through a chaotic and uncertain future. The bigger purpose that we adopt and take on in our lives, the more meaning we have. Even if you feel like you're stepping out on a ledge as a transformational, conscious leader, you won't be out there alone for long, because the mere fact that you're willing to plant your flag higher up the mountain of purpose, you will gather to you other people who will want to support that because you light them up as well. You give them permission to play a bigger game. Everyone has a capacity to be a leader in consciousness. What really moves people is the energetic hit they get that what I'm saying is actually possible. If there is a sense that I'm embodying that resolution and that sense of possibility, and that I'm offering a trail of breadcrumbs for them to follow behind, that's what gets people. My life as testament shows that that's what leaders need to do in their companies today. They need to find their way to a place where they can occupy that higher ground, and in so doing, they give others permission to follow in their footsteps. Change is really hard, especially transformational change. That is a change in consciousness. I see companies as living systems that metabolize their deepest purpose, guided by authentic leadership, nurtured in the soil of a conscious culture that then deliver impact to all of their stakeholders, not only financial shareholders, but customers, employees, supply chain partners, society, and ultimately the whole of the natural world. I went through the Purpose Guide Institute, and so I'm a purpose coach. My first client was myself. I did a vision quest. My purpose was to heal the wound between money and meaning and profit and purpose to enable business to be a force for good in the world. I did it in the developing world, and now I want to go back to business to enable them to embrace their higher purpose, because I know that's the wellspring for intrinsic motivation, which is to align their work with their deepest purpose and their deepest call. And ultimately, all purpose resolves to serve a call larger than itself. Individually and organizationally, as there is a pursuit beyond immediate self-interest, the Sustainable Development Goals provide a useful frame for businesses to identify where their core competencies, their higher purpose, and the needs of the world can overlap. It's about how can we take our deepest purpose, our core competencies, our capabilities, and lend them in service to something bigger, largely the sustainability agenda. The opportunity is to say, how do we move from the intentional interior piece of my purpose to how do we metabolize all of that to be in service of these larger goals, to build a more just and sustainable world.